What is up, you guys? Welcome to today's video. I have been doing a carnivorous diet for the last 5 months, and I wanted to do one video where I talk about how I do it now, what I've learned, what I eat, what supplements I take, so that people can refer to one video to get started with this and hopefully jumpstart the process, skip a lot of the trial and error. So let's dig into it. So if you follow me on YouTube or Instagram, you know that I've done other videos. I did a video called 4 Keys to a Carnivorous Diet, where I talked about what I thought were some important elements on how to do a carnivorous diet when you get started, what food groups to include. So I wanna kind of circle back to that, talk about how I'm doing it now, what's worked, what hasn't, and how to get started in what I think is the best way with this type of diet. But before we do that, let's just dig into this one issue. Why in the heck would you want to do a carnivorous diet in the first place? Well, I think that if you look on the internet, what you'll find is that a lot of people are really noticing some major health benefits with this type of diet. I continue to think that a carnivorous diet is a great way to do an elimination diet. If you have autoimmune issues, eczema, psoriasis, autoimmune thyroid disease, rheumatologic conditions, joint pain, sleep issues, any of these things, a lot of times functional medicine docs in general will recommend an elimination diet. I think that a carnivorous diet is one of the best ways to do an elimination diet because it eliminates all the plants, which are often sources of immunologic triggers. So I, in addition to that, believe that a carnivorous diet is sustainable long-term, and a lot of people end up just sticking with it when they do an elimination diet because they feel so good on it. If you look on meatheals.com, some of these other carnivore forums, a lot of people find real mood improvements, energy improvements, joint pain improvements, improvements in immunologic autoimmune disease. So that, I think, is the great reason to do the experiment if you're interested in it. Okay, so moving on. How do we do it? You can refer back to my 4 Keys to Carnivore video that I did a couple of months ago, but let's do an update on that. I'm still doing almost everything exactly like I talked about in that video. So the points I went over in that video were: number 1, methionine-glycine balance. I still think this is hugely important, and it's the reason I add collagen to my foods or glycine. I go back and forth, but usually I just use collagen. I end up using about 10 grams of collagen for every 100 grams of protein that I'm eating. Now, a pound of meat is about 100 grams of protein, so for every pound of meat, 10, maybe 20 grams of collagen for that. I use Great Lakes. I just add it to the meat or I put it in water. Collagen is a source of glycine. You need glycine to balance methionine in your human biochemistry. There's really no way around this. And if you get glycine deficient, you're not going to make things like collagen or glutathione, which is a major cellular antioxidant, as well as you could, and you're just not going to feel as good. And I think in general, collagen is something that benefits athletes, anyone that likes to move, which is all of us, for tendon ligamentous strength. And as we know, glycine is also important to make glutathione. So that, I think, is super important. What else do people often miss on a carnivorous diet? As I've talked about before, I think a carnivorous diet needs to be more than just meat and water. Some people do great on that. That is awesome. I haven't seen their labs. I know Jordan Peterson basically just eats meat and water. But I think from an evolutionary perspective, we would have done more than that. We would have eaten the tendons, which goes back to the first point about collagen, glycine source. And then I think we also need to think about where some of the key nutrients that we're pretty sure humans need are coming from on a carnivorous diet. One of them is omega-3s. I talked about this in the 4 Keys to a Carnivorous Diet video. So I have a specific source of omega-3 that I like, but I think most people would eat fish of some sort. Again, I would try and select low mercury fish. I would go for wild salmon. I like salmon eggs. I like salmon roe. R-O-E is the way you spell roe. It is a great source of phospholipid DHA, which is the main omega-3 that a human needs. Your body can retroconvert DHA into EPA. So if you have a good source of DHA in your diet, especially a phospholipid source like the kind you find in salmon roe, which has been shown to cross the blood-brain barrier better, you'll have a good source of omega-3s and you won't need to worry about this. I just worry about people eating only meat and are you getting enough EPA and DHA? You can check those things So if you are curious, you should check RBC, red blood cell omega-3 levels, really RBC fatty acid levels. A lot of companies do this, but you want to know what your omega-3 index is and make sure you're getting enough omega-3. It's something that we need. We don't want to overconsume it. I'm not as big a fan of fish oil because a lot of the supplements are rancid. I'd rather get it in the phospholipid form rather than the triglyceride or ester form that a lot of the fish oils are formulated as. So I like salmon roe, and that is also a good source of iodine for me. So when you get your omega-3, you're probably going to get plenty of iodine. You need to have a source of iodine, whether it's egg yolks or salmon or fish or salmon roe. You need to think about where your iodine is coming from. I worry that a meat and water diet is going to be iodine deficient as well. So what have we done so far? We talked about glycine, methionine, omega-3, iodine. One of the things I did not talk about in the 4 Keys to Carnivore diet was a calcium source. The more I've thought about this as I've evolved in my own sort of carnivore journey over the last 5 months, I've really come to appreciate the importance of a calcium source in our diets as well. Some people do dairy on carnivore. I don't do dairy. I think it's an allergen for me. I think a lot of people find dairy, specifically the casein and the whey, to be triggering for rheumatologic issues, immune issues, mucus production, skin issues. So if dairy is a trigger for you, then you're going to cut that out and you're not going to have a calcium source in dairy. So what do you do if you don't have dairy on a carnivorous diet? I use bone meal. So it's ground up bones. And it sounds crazy, but if you think about it, all the carnivores that we know eat bones. I went to the zoo recently. They feed the lions bones, and they don't just like to chew on them and spit them out. They eat the bone. And I think our ancestors, if you look at Willem or Stephenson with the Eskimo, the Inuit, was saying that the Inuit would chew the soft ends of the bones. There's a lot of evidence of carnivorous people or just indigenous people in general eating bones for calcium. You don't get a lot of calcium in bone broth, so you have to eat some sort of the actual bone meal to get the calcium. So I just use a bone meal supplement. I use about half a tablespoon of bone meal a day for calcium. The other cool thing about bone meal is that it has other trace minerals in it that we don't get other places in the animal either. One of these is boron. I've talked a lot about boron on Instagram. There's been some great research on boron lowering sex hormone binding globulin, raising free testosterone. Both of those are good things. That's in males generally. If you look in females, boron tends to normalize the hormones as well. Boron is a mineral that we need, and if we get deficient in boron, it probably causes issues in terms of hormonal synthesis. I won't go into tons of details there, but specifically in women, it's been shown to increase estrogen a little bit, and like I said, normalize hormone levels. I can do a whole video on boron if people are interested, but bones are a good source of boron. There's really no other place in the animal where you can get boron. That's where we store it. So either a supplement, which I was doing for a while, or bone meal. So bone meal is calcium, it's boron, it's also a good source of manganese. So I think a calcium source is important. You could use eggshells, but I like the bone meal. So think about calcium, all right? Now, the other thing I talked about in the 4 Keys to Carnivore video was the fat to protein macro ratio. I think this is important. There is something called rabbit starvation, and it's a condition where we eat all protein, we don't get any fat, and we're not eating a lot of carbohydrates, and it results in starvation. It results in biochemical breakdown of the human body. Rabbit starvation is a historical term that refers to Arctic explorers who could only eat lean animals. They didn't have enough fat, and they died. They did not do well. So you need to have some fat in your diet. I really like the work of Ted Naiman. One of the things on his memes that you'll see is that if you're in a low carb state and also a low fat state, that is essentially starvation. Protein is a building block for your body, but fat or carbohydrate are really the fuel. It's an oversimplified model, but you need to have enough fat for your body to run on. Now, how much fat? I think this is an individual thing. You got to think about how much protein you're eating, what your weight loss goals are, and what you want your body composition to be. Generally in the past, I personally have aimed for about 1-to-1 protein to fat in grams. Now, I don't think everybody needs to have that much fat. I end up eating about 300 plus grams of protein a day because I'm eating 3+ pounds of meat. So 300 grams of fat is quite a bit. I don't always get that much, but I'm always thinking about fat. And if I'm only eating lean meat, I'm adding extra fat to it to make sure that I'm getting some fat for fuel. A lot of people have contacted me and said they felt really sluggish on just meat and water. I said, add fat, and they seem to feel a little better. So think about how much fat you're getting if you're not having any carbohydrates on a carnivorous diet. The last thing that I talked about in my 4 Keys to a Carnivore diet originally on YouTube was the importance of organ meats like liver. I still think this is hugely important for a lot of reasons. Let's talk about it a little bit. People don't generally like the taste of liver. Some people can tolerate it, not everybody can. I make liver jerky, which helps with the texture of the liver, and I can end up eating as much as I want when I do it that way. When I tried to cook it regularly, the texture was just too much for me and I couldn't eat it. So that's how I get my liver. And I think liver is one of the key organs. Liver and kidney are sort of similar in their micronutrient composition. I think of heart as like a muscle. If you like heart, you can eat heart. It has a little more coenzyme Q10 than peripheral muscle meat, but I see heart as muscle meat and liver and kidney as probably the key organs that will complement the muscle meat. So why do I think this is important? Well, as I talked about in that video, it's a great source of vitamin A, as well as a lot of other important things in the animal that are not found in the muscle meat. Like vitamin C is found in a higher concentration in liver. There are numerous other trace minerals that are found there, manganese, selenium, zinc, copper, iron, in different concentrations than muscle meat. So I think that it complements the muscle meat quite well, and I include it on my diet. I eat probably maybe 2 ounces of liver per day, and I've found this to be pretty helpful. One interesting anecdote that I've heard in the past is that in animals kept in zoos that are carnivorous, like tigers and lions, when they only fed those animals muscle meat, those animals did not reproduce. When they added the whole animal, which is what they do now, those animals finally began to reproduce. I know humans are not tigers or lions, but I think that it's a great illustration that there are unique nutrients in organ meats and that carnivores eat the whole animal. They're not going to leave the organs for the birds or something. They're going to eat the liver, they're going to eat the heart, they're going to eat the intestines, they're also going to eat the brain. Now, I don't eat the brain. I can't find good sources of brains. I think that if you want to eat brain, that would be great. Again, I think eating the whole animal is the goal. So I think that the organ meats are important, and I think that on any carnivorous diet, you want to have the organ meats to complement the muscle meat. Absolutely, this is a critical piece of it. So let's summarize. What have I talked about in this video so far? I've talked about the importance of an omega-3 source, like salmon roe for me, or wild salmon. You can check your omega-3 levels with all sorts of red blood cell omega assays, which will give you a sense of your omega-3 index and the ratio between omega-3 and omega-6, linoleic acid, arachidonic acid. It's actually a pretty interesting test if you want to look at that going forward. So I talked about omega-3. I talked about the importance of an iodine source, which will usually go with your omega-3 source, but you need to know where your iodine is coming from. And then also we've talked about the methionine-glycine ratio, which is super important, and the importance of collagen, the protein to fat macros, as well as organ meats. And the last thing that I talked about was calcium source, which is the source of bones. I talked about boron, manganese, calcium in the bones. I think those are an important complement to eating the whole animal. And I think if you do all those things, we are really doing our best to mimic a carnivorous animal, which who knows? I mean, I think there's a strong argument that humans may thrive on this diet. Perhaps we are in fact carnivores. I think it's a reasonable thing to consider. And in that case, you want to get all these pieces. We know that animals in the zoo are fed bones. We know that animals in the wild, carnivores in the wild, eat bones as well. So that's all the things that I think are critical at this point. Hopefully this is a super helpful, comprehensive guide to all the pieces of it. Unfortunately, it's not as simple as just eat meat and drink water. But I think if you do all these things together, you're going to be getting a pretty darn comprehensive nutritional survey, and you will do the best possible on this type of diet. Now, everybody always asks me, what do I eat? So I'll run through it really quickly. I generally eat, like I mentioned, 3 to 3.5 pounds of meat a day. It's a lot of steak usually, but I'll vary it occasionally. Mostly though, it's organic grass-fed steak. I'll talk about glyphosate in future videos. There was an interesting study that just came out talking about links between glyphosate and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I try and avoid glyphosate as much as possible. That's Roundup. So I eat 3 to 3.5 pounds of grass-fed organic steak per day. I eat salmon roe, maybe half a tablespoon a day for the iodine and for the omega-3s. I do bone meal, about half a tablespoon of bone meal a day. I just mix it in water. I'll also do collagen on the steaks for the glycine to complement the methionine. I'll add a little extra tallow to the steaks to adjust my protein to fat macros. I generally only use sea salt as a spice. I think that spices can be irritating to the gut for some people. And I'm sort of in this experiment where I want to see how it is with no plants at all in my diet. I also eat liver. I eat the liver jerky, about 2 ounces a day. And I try and eat other organs when I can. Sometimes I'll make kidney jerky or I'll get a little heart here and there. But that's generally what I'm eating in a day. and it's working pretty well for me. I also eat 4 to 6 eggs a day. I just eat the yolks. I eat them raw. It's actually not as gross as it sounds. I separate it from the white. The white of an egg yolk has avidin, which is a compound that binds biotin. I don't want to eat raw whites, not a good idea. I find eating the raw yolks easy and safe. I've never been sick. I've eaten thousands of them in my life, but I'll eat about 4 to 6 raw egg yolks every morning. So that's what I do. Hopefully this is helpful for you guys. Let me know what you think. Leave your questions in the comments. I'll try and take a look at them and respond as I can. I'm also very active on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. The links are below. I'll also link to my website below. Reach out to me if you guys are interested in working with me. I am accepting new clients at this point, and there are lots of ways to get in touch with me. So hopefully this is helpful. Let me know how you guys are doing, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon in the next video.